Okay. All right, Miss Amy. And what's the new horse's name?
His name is Duck.
That's right.
He's an odd duck.
Okay. So anything you want to discuss before we look at the videos? Any background or?
So I don't know anything about him because he came from a kill pen. So don't know anything about him except that he is gated. So that's kind of fun. And I don't know if you'll see any obvious signs that make you think, oh, that's a gated horse, right? He feels very strange to me when I ride him. But then when I look at the video, I'm like, I don't see anything that's that unusual. I'm like, why does he feel like so horrible to ride?
Okay.
And he's really sweet, he's really quiet, but he just feels unstable to me.
Yeah.
But when you look at him, he's super calm and doesn't care about anything. So he doesn't have the same type of instability as certain other horses that I have ridden.
Okay.
Um,
The main thing, and like your mare who was a trotter, she is a standard bred, correct?
yeah, she's a pacer. Yeah, but
Pacer. Okay.
yeah.
So standard breds are a tiny bit in that category, especially if they've raced pacing,
Mhm.
but they're not, I don't think they're genetically gated. So gated horses actually have two specific genetic markers that make them gated.
Yeah, and the pacers, they train them to perform a gait, which is, and that horse almost never paces. She trots. Like if she has a choice, she trots.
Yeah. And standard breds, I don't think fall into the genetic gated horses, but if
Mhm.
this one for sure is gated, we'll look at it. Just knowing that it's a genetic predisposition to basically have more gears than walk, trot, canter.
Right.
Walk, trot, canter are still available. They can do those gaits. The trot is usually pretty rangy. Like it's not a super trot. It's a pretty long stride, rangy trot, but they can trot. But gaiting, no matter from Pasafinos to Tennessee Walkers or whatever kind of gaited horse breed, when they have that genetic marker for gaiting, all gaits are 3 feet on the ground, 1 foot in the air at a time.
Yeah, some variation of that. Yep.
Some variation of a walk,
Mhm.
right? So the key with gated horses, the way they are so different than non-gated horses, is like even your standard bred, you could transition from walk to trot to canter. And then pacing is a different gait entirely, but we don't really want them pacing under saddle unless they're racing.
Mhm.
So what gated horses do is all the work has to be, the balance work can be done in whatever chosen walk speed is available. Right. And you're absolutely right. The challenge with gated horses is stability because they're super prone to extension in the spine, high headed, spine pushing down. But you've cut your teeth on some very good horses. And
I know, right? Why not have another one? That's why I said, oh, I need to buy that, right? So, his breed foundation would be Tennessee Walker and Standard Bred. So he's a McCurdy plantation horse, which I never heard of until I saw him, and I thought, oh, I want one of those, right? Um, and I have yet to see him gait. I saw him gait in a video with another rider, but I haven't seen him do it. He hasn't offered it, and he trots around and canters beautifully.
well,
So, and I don't care if he gaits, you know me, like I just want to ride him well and like whatever will allow him to last as long as possible. So if he doesn't gait, that's fine with me. I'm not like aspiring to be cruising around drinking a glass of wine with my smooth, great gated horse, right? I want to ride my horse for 20 years. So,
yeah. And so people who are really into gated horses, trotting is kind of a major no-no because if they do
right.
trot, trotting is far easier for them physically than gaiting. And so that's why people who are really into gaiting, they never want their horse to trot because the horse will keep breaking into trot out of the gate
Okay.
because the trot's easier. If you don't really care if he gates or doesn't gate, then that opens bigger doors. And even the clients I have who really want their horses to gate, those horses trot and they know the difference between trotting and gating. So
Hmm.
I believe gated horses can easily figure it out. There's no reason if they go in, like I look at them as almost having too many gears. So
Yeah.
part of this instability is they can really fumble their feet up like they have 8 legs sometimes because they can go between various gaits, slow walk, trot, pace, canter, and all of these like different gears that they don't necessarily have control over.
Yeah, and that's what I get from a standardbred occasionally if she's upset or if I'm not clear, you get the stuff, she'll be stumbly, or all of a sudden you get a saddle rack, and it's like, well, that's nice. I didn't ask for that, but that's what I'm riding, and that's okay. All I'm doing is I'm not trying to show them, so it doesn't matter. I'd like to use this horse for endurance too, so having more gears is not necessarily a bad thing for that, right? Because you can mix it up. They can use different whatever is comfortable for them. I don't care if they switch as long as we get there safely.
Yeah. Theoretically, the trot is the easiest gait for all horses, theoretically. Because he's a cross between a standardbred and a Tennessee Walker, you're not sure which side is stronger. He may gait just fine, and it may be a big challenge for him. You don't know till you get there.
Hmm.
But the way I work with gated horses for people who only want their horse to gait is all of the essential elements of overcoming negative habits of movement and developing basic balance have to be done in a walk speed that the horse chooses. And then from there, what gating is increasing the pushing capacity in the walk to increase the tempo or the miles per hour that takes you up to a trot speed in a walk coordination.
Footfall. Yeah.
Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
That's interesting. Yeah. See, I knew you were going to be perfect for this horse too, because you've done stuff with a lot of gator horses. So,
And I usually get the ones, that are either lame or blowing up.
right.
So some of my clients care about gating, some don't. But if you really want a horse to gait, whatever that, you can't do regular transitions like walk to trot to canter. If you want them to gait, you start at their chosen walk, which we could call their working speed.
Hmm.
Then you have to go to a collected walk. So you have to get a higher level of balance at the walk. Then you start increasing the pushing force, which in a walk we might call it medium or extended, but on a gated horse, we're not asking them to lengthen stride. We're asking them to pick up the speed of the trot within the coordination of the walk.
That's a really cool way to explain it. And never heard it explained that way before. So,
Yeah, and I didn't know much about gated horses until I had boatloads of them in training, and so I had to like look it up and really research. And I was working with Pasafinos, Tennessee Walkers, Rocky Mountain horses, Kentucky Mountain horses, like all these different breeds, and Missouri Foxtrotters, and I'm like, it was killing me to look through these books that show all the different footfall patterns of the different gaits for the different breeds. And somewhere in there, I realized, I go, what makes them smooth to ride at a fast speed is the lack of suspension. The lack of
hmm,
suspension is because it's always a 4-beat gait. It's a 4-beat movement.
some
So
of them I've seen too, when they trot, their trot doesn't feature a lot of suspension either.
no, and that's why I
It's
said if
pretty flat.
genetically bred gated horse, it's going to be a flat, long, rangy movement.
Hmm.
You don't, even in the trot, you don't get much suspension out of the gated horses, but they can trot. And sometimes the trot is very beneficial for rehab purposes. And people who only want their gated horse to gait sort of panic when I say that, because the big belief in the gated world is if you ever let your gated horse trot, you'll ruin his gaits.
Hmm.
I don't find that to be the case.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But it's a big belief in that gated world. So
Well, let's find out because I don't care if my gator horse trots. So, and his trot is going to be better than any of the other trots I have to ride. So,
but even just because he does have Tennessee Walker breeding, my theoretically, and every horse will make a liar out of me, but theoretically, it would be still working on the same spinal functions: rotation, alignment, getting out of extension, getting the straightness, and then slowly building the flexion. And so it will help as you start to play with speed with him, as you're increasing the flexion of the spine. A metronome or music is particularly helpful
mhm.
with the gated horses, because it really helps you, because they can change footfall patterns within the same speed. So you
Yeah,
almost need a rhythmic tempo to help them kind of sort out which gear they're in for that moment officially.
we will find the theme song.
And do you find that's already happening, that he sort of shifts gears and leg pattern movement, and is
You
that
know,
feels
I've only ridden him a couple of times, and he feels so rushy to me
Mhm.
that I have just tried to focus on using circles to slow him down a little bit. And maybe that's his preferred speed though, like rushy forward, which is fine because he's super quiet. Like I don't feel unsafe or like he's going to take off on me. He just feels it either feels like someone asked him, someone got on and was always like, let's go, let's go, let's go. So because he's new, I don't want that problem, especially because I trail ride. So I want to have good breaks, but he just feels like he feels very forward and very rushy, and I don't particularly care for that feeling when I get on a horse, especially a new horse, right? I'd like him to be a little more connected and in tune with me before we add speed
Yeah.
while riding. So I haven't done much with him under saddle. I've
Okay.
ridden him. I think only ridden him 3 times. Like he's super I've only been working with him for 2 weeks. So this is like early days, like just getting him started. And
Excellent.
so I did lots on the ground and then I put a couple rides on him. And the video is my first ride on him.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so you're gonna see like that's just him, how he is. He's pretty quiet, but
Okay.
but
Good. And the rushing, as soon as you fork a leg over, if he takes off, that's part of traditional gated horse training.
yeah, they just and that I think he was a man's gaited horse and off they went and we're gonna cruise down the trail really fast and probably shoot birds and do whatever we do, right? So
But they're smooth. When they go that fast, they're smooth. So
mhm.
people don't mind if they're rushing, but it's not super great for their body.
Right. And I would rather spend the time to work on that and do it right because I'm sure I can go take him out and trail ride 20 miles today, but
Right.
I don't really want to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. Let me make this full screen. And let me move us down here. Oh, he's very handsome.
He's very flashy and a
So
nice looking horse.
are you doing the carpentry lunging in this video?
Yeah. So no, I have 3 things. I have a five like there's like 5 minutes of the carpentry in here. Then I put him on the long line, so about 5 minutes of long lining, and then I get on him and ride him for like 10 minutes.
Okay. So let's just look at his movement.
Because I thought it'd be good to take a look at what he does without me.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's very quiet. So the first thing is, even on that first circle, you can see a little instability, particularly in the hind legs. And he drops the fetlock pretty low. So you may have you want to be careful that, like, when you do circles, it's very important that he stay as straight as possible when possible. Because if you watch his hind legs as he goes around, you'll see a little wobbliness in the hocks, and he's a little bit straight legged, which is just functional. It's functionally straight through the hocks. But do you see what I mean by
Mhm.
that sort of lateral wobble in the hocks?
Yep.
Okay. So that is related to, he's not in, like Flash was in an obvious version of extension and panic, right?
Always. Yeah.
He's in the same use of his spine with it pushing down in extension, but it's a very mild version, very mild. But that's what's creating a little bit abnormal leg movement in the back. And there's a lot of like swing to the pelvis,
Mhm.
and that's
That's what I feel when I ride. I'm like, "Whoa, that's a lot of motion in the ocean."
so extension when the skull is pushing backwards towards his torso. And in gaited horses, they really like the nod, but they're not paying attention to whether the nod is sort of going more backwards or the nod is going more forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I haven't seen too much of that, but I know what you mean when you say nod, and they're always after the nod, and that presence or absence of that meaning it's one gate or another gate, and
Right. So the nod is part of the walk. So when a horse is in a 4-beat walk, the whole neck, like the head sort of nods a little bit up and down when they're in 4 beats. At the trot, the neck is very still.
Mhm.
And then in the canter, there's a little bit of that nod again. That's a natural part of the movement.
Yep.
So when the nod, when the pole is sort of nodding with and it's subtle, you might have to develop your eye to really see the difference of the direction the pole is going. But if you just look at it overall, you'll get an impression that the horse is either lengthening the neck and skull forward and away with the nod going forward and down. Or if you look at the neck muscles, if they're shortening, right, and tightening, then the nod will also have more of a backwards impulse than it does forward.
It's that's what I feel like I see a lot in gaited horses, and it just looks
Yeah, because
not good when you see it.
even in the non-gated world, everybody knows it's important to place the pole as the highest point of the neck. Well, the pole is the highest point of the neck, whether they're in extension or flexion. That's not enough information, right? So to say you want to see the nod, well, the nod can nod forward or the nod can nod backwards. The pole can be the highest point of the neck with the spine pushing down into extension and with the spine lifting up into flexion. So the true telltale sign is really in the direction the pole is going. Forward and away from the torso is related to flexion, and backwards towards the rider, towards his own torso, is extension.
Mhm.
The other way you can tell is the neck muscles shortening or lengthening. So when they're
Yeah, like there it's contracted,
right,
right? Where we're looking at it, I can see.
and you can see the tightness here through
Mhm.
the upper neck muscles, but also let me see what he looks like as he comes around. There'll be that dip, that tight muscle right in front of the withers. And there we go, perfect. This part of his neck will tighten. So from the saddle when you're riding, I wish I could close up on it, but when the skull is pushing more backwards than forward, this muscle right up here is going to be what you can see shorten. And by shorten, what you're going to see is it bulges out. You can see it and it gets a little bulgy. When they lengthen, which is a change in muscle use through their back all the way through the neck related to coming out of extension, this area of his neck is going to lengthen and you'll see that tight muscle kind of stretch out. So it won't look so bulky,
Mhm.
it'll look longer. But do you see how when he nods his head, the emphasis is on the backwards force, not on
Yes.
the forward force, right?
Yeah,
So
I do.
in extension, he's probably been ridden in extension most of his riding career. That's very common, not just with gaited horses, but pretty much with showing gaited horses. That's what they want to see. Now, just there, he starts to relax a little, and it's unfortunate And that's what he was
He's swatting flies.
not. Because there's moments in there where he, like just there, he thinks about changing the direction of his neck. And then he got distracted and it went back into extension. I'm trying to see if there's any moments where there, and notice he
Mhm.
slowed down a hair
He
too.
did. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So the rushing that you're talking about is part of why he's stuck in extension. So just with the decarpentry lunging, an adjustable rein support, he's finding moments where he's starting to go, oh, I could lengthen and this bit isn't going to restrict me, like there. And then notice the hind legs start to get some control. He starts
And that instability in the
there, he does
lower
it.
leg went away.
That's pretty good. So he's exploring, and if this is only 2 weeks in, it's pretty good. Like the reason I love the decarpentry lunging is because the rein is adjustable. If they put pressure on the bit, the rein will give, and you
Yeah.
want that. So with him, we'll look at all of the video, but I like the decarpentry with him, but he's spending quite a bit of time. And like I said, it's only the first 2 weeks and he's already experimenting, which is a good sign. But he's spending an awful lot of time in this session still in extension.
Mm-hmm.
And the first priority I would have, especially for a gaited horse, is let's get out of extension. What will be interesting, the side effect of the spine pushing down into longitudinal extension is hyperrotation of the spine.
I had him trot in this a little bit so you could see his,
Yeah, interesting.
his flat trot.
But actually, for a gaited horse, that's not a bad trot. So all you did was ask for more speed and he gave you the trot.
Yep.
Let's look at that again.
Yeah, just with the whip.
Because if we work on straightness towards long and low and he rushes more and can't get out of extension because he doesn't have control over his speed, then the decarpentry lunging is looking good enough to start there. If he stays, the challenge of the decarpentry lunging is it can encourage extension.
Yeah, he does a little better, I think, on the long reins.
So he does pick up a clean trot. It's not a super trot, but that was clean. He didn't
And
pick,
a decent transition, like by comparison to certain other horses. He doesn't have
yeah.
a crazy
So
transition.
there is almost a gait, almost a Tennessee walking flat walk. So that was what he did coming out of the trot. So the more you ask for speed, he's picking up the trot really pretty well for a gaited horse. So if you like, if I were rehabbing him, I would use trot, but not too much because you see how he goes into more severe extension to give you the trot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would be good to play with because the trot actually alleviates the work of the back muscles. So it can be quite good, but do you see how the extension got really exaggerated playing with speed?
Yeah.
And the key to developing a gaited horse, it can all be done in a slow walk because they're so prone to go into extension that trying to get them to lift their back is much easier for most gaited horses in a slow walk compared to a trot or a fast walk.
Yeah, whereas other horses easier. Like we spent a lot of time working with my other horse in the trot because that's just what she could do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mentally, it's what she could
Yeah.
give. So that makes sense.
The trot was much easier for her. And here's the long reins. Okay, let's pause
Mhm.
there. And actually, this warm blood I'm working with right now, she was in extension and possibly trained in draw reins. and really unstable when we started. Because of chronic extension, she was almost gating. And so with her, her walk is still not good, but we've made most of our headway on finding balance in the trot.
Mm.
So it's unique to every horse. The horses that can't find their balance in the walk tend to find it better in the trot, but they have a harder time with canter and walk. Canter and walk are kind of related. And the horses that find it in the walk easiest have a very hard time trotting. So sometimes you go walk canter to develop the trot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I have a feeling he's going to be a walk canter horse.
I don't canter him in here, but he's got an awesome canter in terms of making the transition into it. I was really surprised like how well he could do it. This is only his second time ever on the long reins. And
Okay.
the first time I put him on there, I really suspect he was either long reined before or he might know how to drive because he just walked right off like that's what you do every day. So
Great.
he was either trained this way or
I can't believe he was at a kill pen. I don't see any.
that's what my vet was here yesterday. He said the same thing. He's like that. And I keep waiting for it, right? We're going to find something.
Right. Right. No, I mean, he is one of the nicest kill pen horses I've ever seen.
Mhm.
2 weeks
He
out.
came with a pile of gated. There was like 5 of them in a lot that came from an estate.
Oh, that could be why.
Mhm. A
That's
couple of,
sad. He could have been somebody's very nice prized horse who wound up
mhm.
there. Yeah, so this is quite good. And the long reins, what I love about the long reins for horses that have been in chronic extension is you see the difference immediately at him trying to lengthen the neck.
Yep, and it's a forward and
So what I started to say about extension is, whoops, sorry, I forgot to put it on airplane mode. The side effect of extension, you still see,
yep.
it disappeared from my screen. Where did it
Oh,
go? There we go.
I
Okay.
see.
Um, so extension is the spine longitudinally, the spine pushing down. So the joints of the spine on the bottom are coming apart, which is why it's called extension. The point of reference is the ventral side of the horse, which means the dorsal tips of the spine are coming together. When they go into that, the side effect is an entirely different function, which is rotation, which is the left-right twisting of the spine. So the long spinous processes on the horse, which are kind of like the keel of a boat, whenever they go into extension of the spine, it creates the side effect of hyperrotation. So it's like taking their back and just rocking it like that, right? It's actually a twisting motion, but from our perspective, it feels like a rolling motion or rocking motion. And so that further destabilizes the whole axial skeleton tremendously. So stability becomes a huge problem the longer they're working in extension because of that side effect of hyperrotation. So when we've worked on straightness before, internal straightness, the idea is to stabilize the rotation and create the proper alignment of the whole spine between the skull and the tail. So the long reins for horses that are stuck in extension are quite a good tool because it focuses immediately on correcting and stabilizing rotation issues and slowly builds the alignment from the hindquarter forward on a circle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why he's immediately when you had him in the decarpentry, he was starting to explore coming out of extension, but then he was quickly back into extension and was spending more strides of the session in extension rather than out of extension, which is important. So in the long reins, and this is only his second time, right away you're getting that length in the neck.
Yeah, he looks so much better.
Yeah. And you can see how slow he needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
So what that tells you is that his speed is all coming from overly tightened muscles and a little bit of momentum to go forward, rather than true pushing from the hindquarter or true impulsion, right? So when he lengthens the neck and the back muscles and comes out of extension, he's a little bit unstable and he really wants to slow down. That's his natural amount of pushing force that he has. That's his walk, right?
That's the walk I want to ride right there.
Some people would go, oh my God, that's way too slow.
No.
But that's the speed at which he can lengthen the neck, and he's not yet falling really into long and low. And there he just made me eat my words.
He will. He does it a couple of times on this.
So the way to address long and low in the early stages, because you did the right thing asking for more speed when he was in long and low, but don't forget the elevation, the early stages of flexion, elevating the neck out of long and low is always a balance between breaking and pushing. So you added pushing, which was not bad, but he went back to extension. What encourages the breaking is just the precision of the circle. So if
So you can use it to speed them up or slow them down.
right, so you don't have to add forward when he's in long and low. You can just make your circle very precise.
Okay.
If you stand still and he's in long and low, he's going to still be crooked. Once he's in long and low, you're going to feel he still falls in. He still puts slack on the inside rein.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to still use like right there, you need a boatload of outside rein.
Left hand. Yep.
Yeah. And the upward transition is not a bad idea. But what he's showing us is he doesn't engage and push properly with the hind legs. So, and you also told me before we even looked at the video, you feel how unstable he is. So the braking part of the equation is also used without any speed adjustment. It's a stabilizing use of the body within any speed. So if you quit walking with him and you stood still and let him have 5 minutes at the walk in long and low, don't panic if he goes to long and low. Like you have to get him forward because you know to do that. That's always an option and it's working pretty well. But you also have the option of leave him in long and low, but be very precise on your inside rein and stand still with your feet.
Okay.
Make the circle more precise and see if he pulls himself out of long and low that way. If he doesn't come out of long and low that way, he's probably going to stop and get stuck. And then you move forward anyways. So you can play with that. You can also play with, instead of asking for an upward transition, just ask for a little more forward, like what you're doing now. There, that's enough forward. And then, so
there you go.
So rather than continuing to trot, you can also think of your forward aid, your little bump, is for the sole purpose of elevating the head out of long and low without causing extension, ideally.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. And he isn't so reactive that he was going all the way to trot. I was actually asking him to trot because that's the only thing I knew to do once they got down there. So
yes, and this will develop your eye for kind of how gaited horses go about this, because and it's you can even do this with non-gaited horses. It's not just for gaited horses, but once they're in long and low on the long reins, and when you're riding, think of the pushing force, which is your leg age, your whip, etc. The pushing force is always you're trying to balance with the braking force. So if they're in long and low, you probably need pushing to some extent. How much, you don't know. Maybe the braking gets him out of long and low first, you just experiment. But when you push, only push until he elevates the neck to a long and level and doesn't resort to extension. He might not get out of the walk and go into trot, but you achieve the work of the back and the hindquarter all the same, whether it's walk or trot.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of opportunities here. I rewound it a little bit. There's a couple of, and the trot's not bad. Like what you're choosing to do is working. I'm not bashing it at all. Like you're doing a fantastic job, and I'm giving you more options to play with, because you are so lucky that this half Tennessee Walker has a trot that's good. It is that good. So there, where he starts to go to long and low, you could stand in the middle of your circle.
Yeah, my feet are going, so.
Right, and push a little bit. And there you start pushing, there I'd be done.
That's enough, yep.
And then you ask for trot, so he has to resort to extension to give it, right?
I could have left him alone and he would have spent more of those quality steps as we came around there. I get it.
And that's just timing and feel. So you're just kind of playing with transitions. Well, not even transitions. It's that breaking, pushing balance. So the straightness of the long reins on some degree of a turn or a circle is your breaking element. And then a little cluck or smooch or tap with the outside rein is your pushing element. And so you're trying to always find, if he's high-headed, the balance between the reins is most important during the strides where he's high-headed. That's what gets him out of extension, is stabilizing the straightness. But then he's going to fall into long and low. So wait for him to fall into long and low. And once he does, play with tightening the turn and or increasing the forward energy, only until you see that head and neck begin to come out of long and low, that it has an upward trajectory, but you're going to stop pushing before he goes back to extension, if possible.
Yeah, that'll be a test of the finesse of the hands.
Yeah, it's our coordination.
Yep.
But if you really just watch his neck, like as long as you're familiar with the kind of more subtle version of extension that he's giving you compared to both of your other girls.
Yeah. That was why it was hard for me, because I'm like, well, geez, that looks pretty darn good, right? Like by comparison, I was like, I'm not even gonna mess with you. You're broke and you are perfect. And then I got on him and I went, and you're terrible to ride. So
yeah. And so you feel the effect of it, even though he's not in llama mode, like the girls were.
Yeah.
It still has the same effect on destabilizing his back.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible, that spectrum. Like people don't understand if they've only got one horse, right? You can ride that spectrum, and it's so interesting.
Yeah. And you're well prepared for this with the other girls. He just has a more subtle version, but now you're so well versed in correcting rotation, correcting alignment, adjusting the braking and pushing, that if you just watch him, any time he starts to come back towards you with his head and neck when you're in the saddle, that's when you're not going to try to keep a rein contact. You're going to work one rein at a time. Focus on the levelness of your seat bones, the alignment of his neck to your seat bones, with or without steering, doesn't matter too much, until he completely voluntarily shifts into the posture of lengthening his neck and very likely falling into long and low. And you could even leave him in long and low. If he could stay in long and low for 5 consecutive minutes, then I would start asking to adjust the braking and pushing. Because it'll be interesting to see with a rider on.
Way harder. He's not near. I never hardly got him to do that even once. He was very braced.
That's pretty good. For a moment, he tried, and then he lost it.
Yeah, and he takes off.
So if you watch his hindquarters, you see the instability there. There's a bit of rocking, which is what you're feeling in the saddle. I would start the first week or two without steering. So what you're going to feel is when his hindquarters become a little unstable, It's related to the alignment, which is different than the rotation. So the rotation is the vertical upward force, one seat bone or the other, which we've worked on a lot with your other girls.
Mm-hmm.
That you've got the hang of. But because his hindquarter and back are unstable, he's going to sway a little bit side to side with his hindquarter, which is going to make it hard for you to keep a path of travel. The way we feel the hindquarters swaying is not up and down, but they turn our seat bones a little bit left or right. They twist our pelvis a little when their hindquarter becomes unstable. Does that make sense?
That is what it feels like when I ride him, like that I'm being pushed and pulled this way.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. So think of your intended path of travel is 12 o'clock, and you maybe get one step on the 12 o'clock path. And then when his hindquarter becomes unstable, he's going to twist your pelvis to be facing 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock. Does that make sense? And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you feel him already, he's going to just twist your pelvis and redirect your seat bones. You still have to manage the up down. That's a different element. But I think the reason I'm saying start without steering is because of that instability in the hindquarter. Your intended path was 12 o'clock. 2 steps into it, he's got you pointed to 11 o'clock. What I would do is go, okay, 11 o'clock is now our new 12 o'clock path of travel. And put his neck in front of your.
Match it. Mm-hmm.
So, because it's a big battle if you try to control the hindquarter. If you give up steering to build the internal alignment, he will gain the stability of his hindquarter, and then the steering will be easy. You won't fight him to have the steering from the saddle. But right now, he's going to keep pulling you off your intended path of travel with your seat.
That is exactly what it felt like to ride him. And like, he's obviously broke, right? And I was like, what's a good thing I wasn't trying to steer, because I don't think he was going to cooperate with me steering anyway, because he was just doing whatever. So
yeah, I mean, he's 100% willing to do what you ask. It's a physical instability. He just can't do it.
Yeah.
So every single time, if you just feel you're going to be passive in your seat, other than keeping your own seat bones level to each other, which is going to address the rotation issue. That's very important, because that's the only way we can correct and stabilize the rotation. So you're going to feel on him every couple of steps. You're going to be putting a little extra weight on your right seat bone. The next couple of steps, the left seat bone. The next couple of steps, the right seat bone. The next couple of steps, the left seat bone. So what you can do is just try to stay as level as possible in your own seat bones, but let him choose the direction of your seat bones. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And wherever that path is, you're going to center his neck bones to your seat bones between the reins. So wherever he goes with his hindquarter, you're putting his neck in a stable relationship to the ever-changing direction of his hindquarter. Does that make sense?
I can do that. Yeah, that's doable.
Yeah. And if you don't, the steering would be a nightmare, and it's a full-time job to keep yourself level and stable when they're coming out of a habit of extension like this. So when you can steer, you can try once in a while. But as soon as you feel him turn your pelvis on a new direction, give up your idea of steering for the moment and go straight from there. So every time he gets your pelvis twisted, that's your brand new path of travel. And his neck, you want to feel between the reins. And I think we did this with Flash, really feeling the lower bones of the neck through your hands.
Yeah.
And as you feel his shoulders and scapula move, that line of force between your seat bones through your hands up to his neck should feel geometrically straight, without wiggle, broomstick straight. Right.
The T.
And that will be, if you can do that, even on ever changing paths of travel, that is what stabilizes the hindquarter. Because when the hindquarter becomes unstable, even if you can't see it, they'll shift the lower neck into one shoulder or the other in order to compensate. And that's why we feel the loss of steering, because the shoulders are getting unstable now too. And then it just becomes a big hot mess. So if you give up the steering and you're passive with your seat, letting on the direction, but you're very active to keep the neck in a direct line of force to your seat bones all the time. And then keep your seat bones level. And he will go into long and low in one ride. He will
I
be
hope so.
in one ride. And I would leave him in long and low for the first ride. You have maybe up to 3 rides. And if he wants to stop and think about it, be pretty generous with him the first couple of rides. Then as he is kind of starting off wanting to be there, which I think he will, because it'll feel good, then only start your warm up, getting him straight, getting him into long and low, give him 5 minutes of consistent long and low, and then start to play with the braking, pushing balance to elevate the neck out of long and low. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think.
But I would not do the decarpentry lunging yet. That will come later. But right now, I think your fastest path of progress with him is going to be the long reins on a moving circle or a stationary circle, doesn't matter. And riding. The riding will help him quite a bit.
Probably more, that's the most bang for the buck.
But I can tell you're stiffening more than you usually do.
Well, it's the first time I've ever ridden him.
Right.
So
I'm sure you're a bit nervous, not
yeah.
sure what to expect. And he's very unstable. You can see
Yeah.
that in the effect on your body.
So he feels like the instability in him feels to me like this is a horse that should be freaking out, spooking, shying, spinning because he feels so unstable. I'm anticipating that that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Because that's what my other horses do when they are unstable. So, but he doesn't have that mental
Welcome
piece of
to
it.
the difference between mares and gelties.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's very tolerant.
Very tolerant. Yes. And that's why people don't like mares. I go, once you involve hormones, mares and stallions, you just you get more horse, you get more opinion, you get more sense of self-preservation. Nothing wrong with it. But I understand what you're saying completely. It's a bit shocking after working through this with your mares that as unstable as he is, that he's not defensive.
No, that's kind of why you probably see what you see there is because I'm like, good God, this horse feels like he should bolt any second, and he never does. So
yeah. And part of so in kind of looking at this, what I'm thinking is you might give him, how many times a week do you work him?
he can probably do 3 or 4. He's very unfit, so his fitness level needs to come along a little more. He's lost weight since he's been here, but
So yeah, see, this is quite good. This is even better than the decarpentry lunging. With everything we've talked about factored in, he's doing pretty well under saddle, which tells me, and this is true with most horses that have been in chronic extension, they do almost better under saddle because of the rider's weight. It can be an enormously helpful stabilizer, especially as they're learning to decontract the back and the neck muscles. Our body weight can help them learn to stabilize in the back and hindquarter. So what I would do is give him 3 to 4 sessions of just the long reins, really being generous with him staying in long and low that first week in the groundwork. Let him really explore that change of muscle use and just let him fall in love with being out of extension, even though we're leaving him on the forehand for the first week of just long reins.
Okay.
Then the second week, do a long rein warm up. And you can do one direction per session. You can do both directions per session. I think either way is okay with him. But maybe do a long rein warm up for up to 20 minutes, whatever you feel you need with him. Minimum of 10, probably won't need more than 20 as a warm up. And then get on and ride. And then when you ride, just do what we talked about. Don't steer. Focus on really lengthening your low back, because the way he moves, and this is true for all women across the board, we all overarch our lumbar. It's just part of our design. And when a horse is in extension, and when we are not sure about the horse, if our safety is at all in question, we arch our lumbar. It's instinctual.
Yep.
And so,
Protective.
right. And so what you're going to concentrate on is really straightening your lumbar, keeping your pelvis, your seat bones sort of as quiet and stable as possible by constantly adapting your body weight. That's all you have to do. It's not a muscle effort, it's just body weight. And then put his neck in front of your seat bones wherever he takes your seat bones. And he will be in long and low in the very first session of riding, I guarantee. And he might stop a lot, but that's when you're going to give leg, but give him to the count of 10 to get going again. Like, don't be in a hurry to get him going. Let him think his way into forward. If he halts, especially in long and low, let him learn how to push off better and slowly. See, that's pretty good. And this being his first ride, he's a gentle, lovely soul. And he is in much better shape than where you started with Flash. Well, Flash.
You mean he's broke? He's broke to ride.
Flash was. Yeah. Because I expected to see, if he looks this good, I expected to see some sign of lameness. And I'm not, he's a bit stiff, he's disengaged, he's moving in extension, but even that trot was surprisingly good. I think the sad truth of this horse was his owner probably died, and whoever has his estate just wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah, that's what I think too, because he's a very nice horse.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely.
Very good. So that's the one I got out of him where I really felt that he was.
Yeah.
And then he went immediately back.
The only reason you're not getting more of it is because you're trying to steer a little bit. Like, it looks like you're mostly letting him go where he wants, but in any direction you're giving him is kind of counterproductive for right now. You would get the result faster in the change of his posture and use.
I think what I'm trying to do, because I wasn't caring where he went, except for there's an open door that you can't see behind my husband, which he's very interested. This, like over here, I have to steer.
Of course.
But what you're seeing me probably try to do is worry more about the neck and where his nose is.
Yeah.
You know, trying to align that nose to tail.
Yes.
And I'm not as worried about the rocking, correcting the rocking. And so what you're seeing is my hands trying to keep that
neck stable.
Center. Yeah, which is probably, I mean, those two things have to be worked on, but I'm totally ignoring the other one. So
no, this is fine. So I would work a little more with your lumbar and stability in your pelvis. What you're doing with the reins is great, but I think trying to think nose to tail on an unstable hindquarter is throwing you off a little.
Yeah, it's like trying to make a straight line on a curvy freeway.
Right. So just begin the line neck to seat bones, neck to your seat bones.
Okay.
Okay. And wherever he puts your seat bones, if you're listening with your seat bones to where the direction is going, you'll be even quicker with between the reins. It'll help you be a little bit more accurate. See, that's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, for your first ride, this is fantastic. And let me pause it there because let me go back just a smidge. Oops, too far. This is a nice angle of his neck. Do you see that muscle I was talking
Yep.
about when we looked at the decarpentry? How long that gets?
And it's all soft and it's not all sinewy like it was when he was.
It's not bulging. So
Yeah.
see, when it does stretch, you can actually see the muscle definition. That means it's usually pretty tight. You can really, you see all that muscle definition there?
Mm-hmm.
That means usually it's contracting and shortening. So you'll really see it stretch from the saddle. You see how the skull is going away from you and downward, which is okay for now. But the whole mane is sort of being stretched forward and away. And let's see when he goes back to extension. So just watch him come across at that particular use of his neck. So there he goes up a little. You see it shorten there. There he's going, he's lengthening.
Lengthening.
He goes up. Now do you see how it's bulging? Oh, my cat is trying to take my door down. Very good. It's easier to see on the side without mane.
Without the mane where you can see the top. Yeah.
When you're riding, if you look at the right side of his neck, it'll help you with the timing and help you develop a sensitivity to the smallest changes in your seat bone and his neck alignment. Because you can sit there and watch with your eyeballs the directional changes of his neck.
Yeah, and it's real close.
Yeah, it's subtle. It's more
Close.
subtle. It's not like with Flash. It was llama, slam my head down. Llama,
Yeah.
slam my head down. And that's just a more extreme version of the same use. This
Yeah,
is,
his range is smaller, that he does the same thing.
yes,
Yep.
the teeter-totter is closer to the right balance, but it's just as important. It's just more subtle. That's quite nice. And I would let him root those reins right now too. No big
Yep.
deal.
Hey, he's not ripping me out of the seat, which the other one was able to do, so.
Yeah, very nice. Oh, the other thing you can see from the saddle with his neck is when you can see, let me go back just a smidge. That's what made me think of it. Watch as he roots a little bit and really lengthens the neck. Right. Oh, I went back too far. Hang on.
I have to go around again.
Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't quite see it there, but I was when you were coming across the arena here. Okay, so let me see if I can get the pause at the right place. So there, when he's going into extension like that, from your perspective, if you look down, you will clearly see the bottom of his neck right here. You'll see those bones bulging the neck right out. This is an obvious one. But again, there's a subtle version. When you can see this part of his neck here, just in front of the shoulders from the saddle, that means the neck muscles are shortening. That's the spinal bones actually pushing down that make the neck bulge out to where we can see the base of the neck from the saddle. And then there, when they do that, if you look from here, you're only going to see this far down his neck. You're not going to be able to see his lower neck. That's another way to train yourself to look for the neck use related to extension.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And looking at it from that angle is very easy to understand.
So that's what's happening. From here, if we can see the bottom of the neck, then they're pushing the spine down. That's why we can see the bottom of the neck. When they truly lengthen the neck, you see how the windpipe hangs?
Yeah.
Because the bones of the spine are flexing upward, right? So that's why you can't see it. When they go back into extension, so this is the proper lengthening of the neck muscles. which is directed by a gentle flexion of the cervical spine. So the cervical spine is coming up and translating back, which is why you can't see the base of the neck when you're in the saddle, when they're in that use. And then he's going to go back to extension. So there, you could see the bottom.
Mhm.
You see
Yeah.
that? And that's another.
You could almost put a little fleck of paint right there and you'd be able to see it or not see it.
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
put sticky dot.
Yeah. Piece of tape.
Yeah. So even if it's a mild version of shortening, that, because that's the neck, like the lower neck bones are part of when the back flexes and comes up into flexion, the neck bones are translating upward and backward with the back, right? So that's
Mhm.
allows the front legs to push upward rather than paddling backwards. When the weight's on the forehand, not so much. But
Right.
this is only 2 weeks into it. I would say a week or two of him mostly in long and low is just going to allow him to kind of loosen up that tightness he's got. And then you're going to be good to go, asking for him to lift his back little by little through the breaking and pushing adjustments. And if he can't stay in long and low, there's another exercise we can work on using outside bend, but I don't know that he's going to need it. I kind of have a feeling if you just put the neck in front of your seat bones, just build the first half of the line.
Mhm. Yeah.
and follow where the back half of the line is going.
Yep.
So you're really creating the straight line all the way through, but you're having to adapt to instability in at the back end of the line.
In theory, that should be easier to do.
It'll be easier for
Yeah.
both of you guys. And he will stabilize, because I think part of the reason he resorts to extension as much as he does is that instability that you're feeling.
He does that nose out thing a lot
Let him
when
do
he's
that for now. That's a little bit exploring coming out of extension. People get afraid that that rooting will become a bad habit, but it's really sometimes they'll toss their head or they'll shake their head or they'll root really hard as a way to kind of loosen up the back and the neck muscles.
and the fact that he's doing it more towards the as we get into it, that tells me that that's exploration, not I'm having a bad attitude.
Yeah, there's not a bad bone in this horse's body. Yeah, so I would look at everything he does, look at all of his behavior as a physical exploration, because you're giving him room to explore.
Yeah.
You're not trying to hold him in a frame. I have a feeling leaving him in long and low, even for say a couple of weeks, he's going to lose forward and your rushing problems will be the
Just
least.
go away. Yeah.
Yeah, because he naturally, as soon as he does try to lengthen the neck and the back muscles, he keeps, whether it was the decarpentry, the long reins, and under saddle, he always has a tendency to slow down as he lengthens.
Mhm.
So I think the rushing problem is directly related to him going back to extension. And as soon as he's out of extension, and that's not true for every horse, but I think for him, he's not really rushing. It's what he's doing to stabilize while he's in extension.
And we all know like Flash can rush in long and low all day.
Oh,
So
yeah,
just dragging her nose really fast around the arena.
exactly.
We shouldn't have that problem.
No, I think he's going to be kind of the opposite, in that he is going to be one that you lose forward when he goes into long and low,
Mhm.
which, like we talked about, even if you don't want him to gait, that inclination to break, it makes it easy to add leg, with the caveat that it's also easy to add too much leg.
Yeah. And you don't want to get in a situation where you constantly have to have leg either. So
No, and you won't have to constantly have to have leg, but when you give leg, what I'm saying is, because even if it's slow, balance has to be self-propelled. And he's self-propelled even if he's slow. If he starts stopping a lot, be patient with him. But I don't think it's going to be hard. I don't think he's going to get stuck there. I just think he's going to opt to slow down when he comes out of extension, which is great.
Okay. So we don't want to rush him out of that and be like, come on, let's go. Let's
Exactly. So
wait for it.
the challenge with a horse that chooses that is like, okay, Flash was the opposite. When she was in long and low, she would go faster. But when you asked her to slow down, she would go back to extension. So getting her to slow down without going into extension was the tricky part. He's the opposite. So getting him to increase speed without going into extension is his challenge.
Okay.
It's just the other side of the same coin. She's heads, he's tails.
Fun. I get to learn a whole new operating system.
Yeah, but like with Flash, you learned you didn't have to use bit pressure. You could use turns and circles and figure eights and neck bends to help her slow down with one rein rather than going into extension and having her panic from the bit pressure.
Mm-hmm.
With him, it's going to be a lot more straight lines. He's going to try to turn because he's unstable. And you're going to ride him straight out of every time he turns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that'll be different. Yep.
You want to build forward. So when he falls out of your path of travel, left or right, that's why I'm saying you immediately have a new straight line, right? Don't
Yep.
continue on the turn once he loses it. It's not going to work.
Yep.
And then when you do give leg, if he halts, give leg, and you're trying to communicate to him, could you go forward without resorting to extension in order to do so? Where the question for Flash, that was easy. She always said yes, right? But
Yep.
the question for Flash was, could you slow down and control your forward without going into extension, right? Because we need both.
Yes. Yes. Well, we put these two pieces together, we should have some pretty awesome horses.
That's right. And that's exactly what we learn to do. What training is filling in with skill development where we're not being offered the gift, right? So believe it or
Yeah.
not, Flash's forwardness was the gift, right? But the skill development was controlling her forward motion and slowing down. And so he's probably going to give you the gift of, I'm happy to slow down. And the challenge will be, can we also build some powerful forward energy, right? And not just turtle dust the rest of the time.
Right. Hey, that's gonna be fun. I made a lot of turtle dust in my day, so people are always surprised. Oh, what do you do? Well, this is what I do. I make a lot of turtle dust, and that's all the faster they ever go, the other two. And
Yeah, and for them, that's something we had to cultivate and reward.
mm-hmm.
For him, I think he's going to give you that right off the bat, and you're going to learn how to increase the pushing capacity, but avoid the pitfall of extension, which will be useful on your girls too.
Yeah, yeah, and that interpreting the different. So, and I wouldn't have looked at him and been like, "Oh, he's totally an extension." Not all the time, right? But as you showed me here, there's more subtle ways for them to be in that posture without being obvious about it.
And
So,
in the carpentry lunging, he was in extension 98%
mhm.
of the time.
Yeah, after you pointed it out, I of course saw it right away, but
And the long reins, I think it will stabilize him a little bit for you to ride. I think you could do that on the long reins on a circle. And after a week of long reins at the walk, even if he's in long and low the whole freaking time, I wouldn't try to fix long and low the first week.
okay.
Just let him be in long and low. It's a little bit of a hard to manage the long reins, but I would kind
I
of,
can do it.
yeah, I'd kind of leave him there the first week. And then the second week, you can, when you're doing your warm up, just leave him there for 5 minutes and then start adding a little bit of forward, enough to lift his head. And then after the warm up, when you ride him, you should feel a huge difference after that 1 week of long reins. You'll feel a huge
Okay.
difference in his stability.
That'll be fun. I'll look forward to that because he was a real pleasure to ride.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think you got quite a nice horse from the Kilpin. I'm happy to see that he has landed with you.
I do not like gambling, and for some reason on Memorial Day, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna gamble on this."
There you go.
Yeah. Cool. I learned lots, and I'm looking forward to seeing and doing this kind of work. Like, what kind of he may never gate, or maybe we get an awesome gate, or whatever he's willing to offer. I don't really care. So
I think he has a trot that looks as good as a non-gated horse. Like when I say the trots on gated horses are rangy, I mean, they're like double the stride length he's taking, and they lengthen out their back, disengage their hindquarter. It's a hot mess. This trot just looks like kind of an awkward but normal trot.
yeah,
It doesn't look like a gated horse trot to me. I think you could really develop that trot. And if you don't care about gating, I think you're going to have such a nice trot. I don't see the point in getting him to gate.
yeah,
I think he's going to have such a smooth, nice trot. And the trot is mechanically the most efficient speed for the horse. It's the easiest on their back muscles because they use the tendon ligament system, the elastic strain energy in the trot more than they use muscle. So it's very comfortable for horses to trot, even gated horses. And if the trot's really rangy and it looks like they're kind of struggling and stressed out, then I would say go with the gating. But in his case, I think he's going to have quite a nice trot. And if you don't care about the gating, I wouldn't encourage it. I go, if it happens, it happens. It's in there somewhere. But I think for his body development, you're better off doing walk, trot, canter.
yeah. And because I would probably want to do with him. The only thing that it's useful for is for them to have something else to do, right? Like I don't particularly care to distance ride at the canter either, but sometimes they'll offer it, and you just go, "Oh, okay. If you're tired of trotting, we can canter." And if that's what you want to do, great. We'll do that for 10 minutes, right? Like
So
that's
think
kind of
what gating is, because it's a 4-beat walk at a trot tempo, a trot miles per hour, right? So it's very quick, short strides, which technically means it's a collected walk. So a collected walk takes maximum effort in their.
yeah, tons of energy,
So
not
gating,
efficient.
and that's the reason I work with gated horses at the walk and then maybe the canter. And both of those, a regular walk and a canter, well balanced, allow them to trot, allow them to gait very clean, very nicely, very efficiently. But gating, ironically, it's easiest for the rider, but it is hard for the horse.
Hmm.
It is a collected walk at a fast speed. It's a lot of work for their backs. And that's why they typically resort to extension, because they can't hold the flexion that long. It's a tremendous amount of work for the gated horse to gait correctly with a lifted.
Yeah.
So that's why they resort to kind of big bits and high heads and the backs down, because that's quick and easy. You can do that today. But to really develop a flexed spine within gating movement is a very challenging collected walk. So if you're going to ride him distance, I would kind of eliminate the gating, other than he'll do it once in a while maybe. But the trot, a good walk and the trot and a good canter, if you're going to ride 25 milers or 50 milers, you do not want to gate on the trails. That is
I don't disagree with you. And the people that are out there doing it, I just think, wow, that looks uncomfortable. It looks inefficient. It doesn't look like that horse is happy. So,
No,
yeah.
and what people like about gated horses, ironically, is that no matter how fast you're going, they're always smooth. There's no suspension, so they
Mhm.
don't bounce. But people don't bounce. And so it's very easy for the rider And ironically, it's super hard on the horses. And so
Interesting.
it's sad to me because a lot of gaited horses wind up with huge issues, health issues, lameness issues, behavioral issues, because it's so difficult and people aren't recognizing how difficult that is for them to do comfortably and correctly.
Yeah, maybe we build a foundation with this other stuff and can experiment with it later, but it seems like the fundamentals would only support doing that well if we then later decide we want to install, or I'm sure well, I know he does it because I've seen him do it, but if we work on those fundamentals and then I decide in a year or two from now that I want to try that, I
Yeah.
think that makes more sense.
Yeah. And part of the reason Flash is doing well on the long distance riding is because the trot is also her
It's
personal.
her thing. Yep. I figured that out. And you know what's really uncomfortable is to ride 25 miles on a pony at the trot.
Yes.
But I'm doing it.
Those halflingers.
Yeah, and a week from now I'm gonna do 50 in one day on a pony at the trot. And it's an athletic feat for me. Like she's been ready to do that for a long time, but I physically could not do it.
Yeah.
So because it's too much for me. So I've had to work up to it myself. But
But if you have him in mind for doing long distance rides, he has a nice enough trot. I agree you could do that on this horse. And
mhm,
I would cultivate the trot will take a little work. The walk will be his easier speed to find his balance and
mhm.
coordination. But the trot's already super good for him having gaited breeding. And you could develop that trot further and definitely take him on some long rides.
Cool. Well, and the quality of the walk implies the quality of the canter, like you were saying, because they're closer related. So hopefully,
Yes. No, and that's why Arabs are first pick for endurance. They don't walk or canter very well, but they
they trot well. Yeah. Yeah. And I watch them, and for every one of their posts, I'm doing three. And it's like, boy, that must be nice.
Yep.
Cool. I appreciate the help, and I'm excited to do some more with him. And we'll check back in with you in probably a month or so once I have some
Excellent.
more rides. We'll get to the point where I've got more rides on him because I'm building up to. So it looks like I actually want to be up there and I'm not afraid of him.
But what a great find, Amy. I think you've got a really nice horse. And any questions before we go?
No, I think I'm good. I know a lot of fundamentals, but like putting them together right for the horse is what I needed help with. So I think you helped me clarify that. Like I know kind of independently, oh, these are the things I would do, but for him specifically, it was hard to gauge what to do because he's so quiet and will probably ride right off of a cliff for me if I tell him to, right? So
No. That's why people love geldings. Yeah. They don't complain.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And I've loved your podcast. Keep up the good work. It's so
Oh, thank
wonderful.
you. I have fun doing it. I'm like, Deb and I get together and talk. We love doing it.
Yeah. I have a show I do for at work that goes to a global audience of like 10,000 people. It's been a lot of fun to work on, so I'm really into them.
Oh, nice. I love them
Yeah.
too. I listen to podcasts all the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk soon. And I wish you were going to come up this year, but it's probably.
Yeah. No, but this remote thing is kind of working. Like I'm amazed at the results all the riders are
Yeah, that people
working
can get.
on video and working through Zoom. It's been fantastic. And part of it is, like you said, you did a great job with this horse so far because you have the idea, you have the theory, you have all the ingredients. And then we just have to kind of look at him and go, ooh, I think this would be the path of least resistance for this horse.
Yeah, but I needed like 4 years of the hands-on to be able to do that.
Yes, you did.
I
We all
needed you to
do.
hold my hand. All right, you have a good evening. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.